coming out of his mouth. He was raced off to the hospital. With a lumbar puncture and a lot of medical care later, everybody realised what the red liquid was: plum juice. Unbeknown to the family, the artful young rogue had found a box of plums and gorged himself till his heart was content. The red liquid was when Cameron decided to disgorge some of the contents. I think this is when his mother first coined the apt phrase to describe Cameron, that he never did things by halves. 3 years later, the family moved from the Tipuki farm to another dairy farm in Omakaroa, Tauranga, where Cameron spent the next 10 years of his life. Farm life gave Cameron a myriad of fun things to do. These included riding the tractor with his dad, riding motorbikes and go-karts with his brother, which was the start of his lifelong love affair with anything to do with motorsport. Cameron was also good at finding animals that needed nursing. He once found 2 baby thrushes with no feathers that Cameron and his mother nursed for 6 weeks until it could fly. Cameron and his brother would also find ways of making their own fun, normally at their peril. One Saturday, they stole away from the house and made their own bow and arrows out of bracken and barberry with a nail for the arrowhead. The aim was to try and shoot insects off the ragwort. Unfortunately, somehow Cameron managed to shoot Dale in the hand, to which Dale has a scar to this day.
Cameron and his family attended the Tauranga Seventh-day Adventist Church and had a wonderful group of friends there. There would be regular Saturday lunches at Robbins Park, Yatton Park or the Tauranga Domain, and then on to AY's. There was always regular social activities such as church teas, skating, games, evenings and water skiing with friends at Omakaroa. From 5, Cameron attended the small Tauranga Seventh-day Adventist primary school at Bethlehem with 40 others. There was never any problem fitting in as they all knew each other from church. One memory of Cameron's school days was that he would use an orange crayon on his pictures too much. Who's heard of orange grass? Cameron would be adamant to his classmates that it was the right colour. This was explained later on in life when it was realised he was colourblind to orange. To his eyes, orange was right. Cameron took Bible studies at Bethlehem Primary School and accepted Jesus Christ as his personal saviour. Cameron was baptised at the age of 12 at the Tauranga Church. Cameron was also in Pathfinders, which is like Boy Scouts but with girls allowed. He loved going on Pathfinder camps and long tramps. Cameron was always cheerful and always happy with the younger kids in Pathfinders. The leader there can remember attempting to teach Cameron and some other boys an etiquette and grooming honour, in particular how to set a table properly. At the time they made a big mockery of it, but would then turn around to the girls with some pride and tell them how a table should be set properly. I also have it on good authority on some camps Cameron was kissing girls under blankets, but what happens on camps stays on camps. Cameron briefly attended Katikat College, and when his parents moved to Tauranga, he went to Otamotai College for his final years. 2 of Cameron's favourite pastimes in his youth were computers and karate. His after-school and holiday job was working the local Apple store, which formed his lifelong love affair with Mac computers. At nights, he learnt Nam Wai Pai, which is a form of karate, kung fu, under Steve Kitson, where with much perseverance he achieved a black belt. I mention these 2 pastimes only because of themselves they're fine, but it was at Otamotai College where Cameron was given the opportunity to use these 2 favourite pastimes simultaneously. In the 7th form, Cameron was made computer room monitor, which he took to with all the autocratic style of Robert Muldoon. Any unsuspecting 3rd formers who were eating, playing band games, or just giving him lip were shown to the door with any new headlock, wrist lock or pressure point he'd learnt. Cameron was also the king of playing hooky from school, managing to cut a 4-week run in 1 term alone. Cameron's parents went on holiday to Australia and Dale, his older brother, was left in charge. Fortunately for Cameron, though, Dale left at 8 and got home at 5, which meant he had no idea if Cameron went to school. Unfortunately, once he got back to school, Cameron needed a reason for his long absence. The reason, a simple but tragic case of pneumonia. That did not end his problem, however. On the report card, it gave the number of days Cameron was absent from school in the high 20s. This was a bad number. Cameron's solution was simple: just hand it over to his parents and hope that the other bad numbers, the C's and D's, would be the focus of his parents' attention. And it was. He got away with it.
Cameron was one of the first of our age to buy his own car with money he saved from weekend work. In hindsight, this was amazing, given Cameron ran what can best be described as a loose monetary policy all of his life. One day he was surprised to find he had money in his account, which he didn't describe as savings, but underspending. That's a 1953 Morris Minor 850 side valve, which he aptly nicknamed Sherman. Cameron even fitted the knob on the gear stick with a go-fast skull. Sherman also had a resident spider, which Cameron took great delight in regularly feeding. And yes, with a wet road and the right camber, you can compression slide a Morris Minor. As with any car under $1,000, reliability was a key issue. Sherman, unfortunately, had alternator issues and was difficult to start. However, the good news was the car was so old it had a crank handle. Many times Cameron had to get out and crank the engine when it stalled at the lights. One day, Sherman required a warrant, and Cameron decided to take it to the local service station with the hope that they were less sophisticated in their testing and it would pass. Unfortunately, the owner's method was even less sophisticated than Cameron anticipated. To test the brakes, he backed some way out of the garage and proceeded to accelerate into the garage with a plan to jam on the brakes. Jam on the brakes he did. What he did not know was the brakes required some additional pumping of the pedal before they would take. By the time he figured this out, it was far too late and he crashed into the workbench at the end of his garage. The garage owner hopped out the car in a rather dazed state. Cameron came around to his side, proffering a, "Oh, it's never done that before." Needless to say, Sherman failed his warrant. Many wonderful times were spent in that car, going to hot pools and visiting friends.
In 1988, school was over and Cameron needed a job. Fortunately, his uncle Phil knew of a job going as a newspaper rep for the Auckland Star. This was a big responsibility that Cameron excelled at, as he managed to quickly computerise all the work, saving time where the other reps used paper-based methods still. The job, much to Cameron's delight, came with a company car, which he took great pleasure in thrashing and handbrake turning the car up and down Queen Street at 4 a.m. in the morning when he used to collect money from the newspaper stands. The downside was he had to organise the paper boys, who were hopelessly unreliable. This problem was solved much to the displeasure of Cameron's mum and Auntie Jill when they were seconded and relegated into the role of paper girls to deliver an area. Unfortunately, the advent of TV media, etc., afternoon papers were dying out and Cameron needed to find another line of work. Cameron's first foray into sales was not a huge success, but showed him the challenges he would face and the persistence required in obtaining the skills for his industry. This new job was to sell advertising in a caravan magazine. He was sent to Christchurch with a company car and paid on a commission basis. Problem was, no sale, no commission, no eats, and Cameron was hungry. Always enterprising, Cameron would sneak into cornfields at night and take home some corn to cook. Whilst that job did not last long, and with a new appreciation for the art of selling, Cameron took at selling cars in Auckland. Cameron also probably perplexed a few of his workmates, as he was probably the only car salesman in Auckland who didn't drink or swear. During his time as a car salesman, Cameron also took on an important role to his Tauranga friends, who wanted to try their luck in the big city of Auckland. Cameron was always there for them, showing them around, getting them settled and keeping in touch. And for people coming to the big smoke, it was comforting to have this kind of support from a friend.
As previously mentioned, Cameron loved cars. This was from a young age when Cameron's father took him to Bay Park in Tauranga to watch the racing. I think if Cameron had been in Old Testament times, he would have appeared in the Bible as Jehu, who drove his chariot furiously. Cameron followed any sort of racing, stock cars, rallying, V8s and Formula One. Speeding tickets, yes, he had a few. But there was one day when that was not going to be a problem. Cameron worked in car sales for Subaru Manukau, who happened to have a contract to provide traffic cop cars. The cars would come from Subaru, be painted up in their livery, and flashing lights installed. They were then delivered by Subaru to the traffic department. Cameron and a work colleague were told one day to pick up 2 of the traffic cop cars for delivery. So off in the traffic cop cars they went. Soon, however, Cameron noticed everybody was getting out of his way. It didn't take Cameron long to figure out that as they looked like the part, these cars gave them a licence to speed. And speed they did. The race was on all down the southern motorway back to Manukau. Lights were turned on, horns blasted to get cars out of the way, and overtaking on the shoulder if necessary. Cameron, in his words, had a wow of a time.
Through hard work and perseverance, Cameron became good at car sales. He was given the opportunity of the prized role in the car yard of selling finance and insurance. Cameron enjoyed this role immensely, and with the money earned went on his first overseas trip to Australia and passed an instructor's driving course and got to dive on the Great Barrier Reef. While Cameron liked this job, he knew he was being called out of the industry to a better life. Cameron got his dream job as manager of the Adventist Book Centre and a nice company car to boot. He loved this ministry and went to all the regional meetings with his books, not worrying about crimping his weekend. Cameron loved running the ABC. The ABC also gave him the opportunity to travel to the United States for the ABC Managers Annual Conference, or as we call it, flat out junket. Cameron took some time off and hired a Mustang and drove across large portions of America. He saw the Grand Canyon and visited one of his favourite movies, Tombstone, where the shootout at the OK Corral happened with Wyatt Earp. He went to NASA, visited the White Estate and the Big Apple. There was a 2-word problem for the ABC job for all of Cameron's friends: Big Camp. Big Camp required the entire ABC to get shifted, and many here can remember that monumental task of helping Cameron shift those infernal books. The shift was always run in accordance with Cameron's just-in-time policy, which was flat out winging it. But in the end, with the help of everyone, the job always got done.
It started with a little tunnel vision and some dizziness. Cameron went to the doctor who diagnosed diabetes. No sweets for Cameron. How depressing. However, it was the wrong diagnosis. After a big seizure, a CT scan was done and a slow-growing tumour was diagnosed. Cameron had 4 to 8 years left. Right from the beginning, Cameron was at peace with what had occurred. Why? For it was well with his soul. He never complained about this bitter twist, a future life, wife, children and friends, all these things lost in time like tears in the rain. He accepted it with the good grace and left the rest in the hands of God. He picked himself up, did his radiation therapy and slowed the tumour somewhat. Cameron was determined to get back to the job he loved and driving. In that he succeeded and worked a full 5 years for the ABC. During this time he added another aspect to his ministry and did sermons all over the North Island, from Kaitaia to Wellington. Cameron continued to pursue his hobbies. He enjoyed golf, but like most people, was terrible at it. Cameron loved fishing, and to everybody's displeasure, had an uncanny knack of always catching the most fish or the biggest fish. However, there came a time when work and driving became too much. Whilst we could tell Cameron was bitterly disappointed at losing these things, he had the good grace to retire from these without complaint. Cameron loved the fellowship of Papatari Church and still continued to play an active role at the church, regularly doing data presentation for the main service. Cameron lived a further 2 years, but was always looking at doing things. Whilst he couldn't work, he always looked forward to playing games with a small group of guys on Thursday nights. These occasions are always a raucous affair, and a grand time is had by all. The day before Cameron was admitted to hospital, he did, however, pull out a stunning feat of winning 2 games in a row. Cameron was admitted into hospital on Friday the 10th and was visited and received the thoughts and well wishes of many throughout the next 10 days, which gave him great comfort. Cameron James, son of Gil and Lorraine, brother of Dale and friend of many, passed away quietly on Monday evening, the 20th of June 2011. He rests awaiting the smiling face of the carpenter. I'd like to end this with a quote by Keats, which I know describes everybody's